Is orientation still locked? Oh, wow. Wow, why do you lock on my orientation? Rude. Sorry, y'all. Okay, hi. So I have been reading this book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I'm reading this book because it was really popular on TikTok. But people kept saying I couldn't read the book. I put it down because it was so hard. The book had me in tears. And if I'm honest, the book had me in tears also. And I'm learning that it's so much easier to do things with others. And so, excuse me, let's do it together. So I'm just going to be on here for like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm just going to read. A lot of you know I stutter. This is actually quite healing because I would always opt out of reading out loud when I was a child in school. And so this is like really a quite helpful experience for me. I'm on page 36. In his conversations with the Dalai Lama, psychologist Paul Ekman distinguished between different types of empathy and compassion. True empathy involves more than knowing what people feel. It also entails the ability to resonate with those feelings. True empathy involves more than knowing what people feel. It also entails the ability to resonate with those feelings. For example, sociopaths may do an excellent job of reading a person's emotional vulnerabilities, but without the ability to resonate with the other person's feelings, knowledge of those feelings become a tool for predation, not connection. This casts light on a curious fact about emotionally immature people. In spite of not resonating empath- empathically, they are often quite canny when it comes to reading other people's intentions and feelings. However, they don't use their understanding of people to foster emotional intimacy. Instead, their empathy operates as an instinctual or superficially sentimental level. However, they don't use their understanding of people to foster emotional intimacy. Instead, their empathy operates at an instinctual or superficially sentimental level. You may feel sized up, but not felt for. You may feel sized up, but not felt for. Lack of resonant empathy suggests a lack of self development. Lack of resonant empathy suggests a lack of self development. Lack of self development. For parents to accurately imagine what their children are feeling, they need to have enough self development to be aware of their own emotions. If they haven't developed their own emotional self awareness, they can't resonate with how others, including their own children, might feel. I'm reading this, y'all. Hey. Why there are so many emotionally immature parents. Many of my clients have shared stories that reflect the emotional immaturity of their parents. For me, this begs the question of what could have caused so much emotional underdevelopment in so many parents. Based on my observations and clinical experience, it seems likely that the parents of many of my clients were emotionally shut down as children. Hi, I'm on page 36. As my clients and I have explored their family histories, they've often recalled evidence of great unhappiness and tension in their parents' early lives. Substance abuse, abandonment, loss, abuse, or traumatic immigration experiences hover in the family background, suggesting an atmosphere of loss, pain, and disconnection. Many people have told me that although they felt disconnected or abused, it was nothing compared to the stories their parents told about their own childhood misery. Often, the relationship between a client's mother and maternal grandmother was conflictual and unsatisfying, even though that grandmother might have become a nurturing figure for the client. It seems that many of my clients' parents never had a supportive or emotionally intimate connection with their own parents, so they developed tough defenses to survive their own emotional loneliness early in life. It's also important to remember that old school parenting, the upbringing my client's parents experienced, was very much about children being seen but not heard. Physical punishment was not only acceptable, it was condoned, even in schools, as the way to make children responsible. For many parents, spare the rod and spoil the child was considered conventional wisdom. They weren't concerned about children's feelings. They saw parenting as being about teaching children how to behave. It wasn't until 1946 that Dr. Benjamin Spock, in the original version of his mega seller, The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care, wildly popularized the idea that children's feelings and individuality were important factors to consider, in addition to physical care and discipline. In the generations before this shift, parenting tended to focus on obedience as the gold standard of children's development rather than thinking about supporting children's emotional security and individuality. In the following stories, you can see the passed down effects of this old school parenting on my clients. We're going to enter a spot that's called Ellie's story. Ellie, the oldest child in a large family, remembered her mother Trudy as a generous person but hard as a rock. Trudy was active at church and in the community and had a reputation as being kind and helpful. But when it came to empathy for her children's feelings, she was impervious. Ellie had frequent nightmares and depended on a favorite stuffed animal to soothe her. One night when Ellie was about 11 years old, her mother suddenly took her comforting stuffed animal and said, "I'm giving this away. You're too old for this." When Ellie begged her mother not to, Trudy told her she was being ridiculous. Although Trudy's good care of Ellie physically, she had no feeling for Ellie's emotional attachment to a precious toy. Ellie was also deeply attached to a cat who had been in the family since she was a toddler. One day, when Ellie came home from school, Trudy announced that she'd given her cat away because it messed in the house. Ellie was devastated. But as Trudy told Ellie years later, "We didn't give a damn about your feelings. We just kept a roof over your heads." That's mean. Sarah, whose mother was emotionally inhibited and standoffish, had a very strict upbringing. She remembers that her mother always seemed to be holding herself back emotionally, as if behind a great wall. But Sarah cherishes a memory of a morning when her mother stood quietly by her bed, fondly watching Sarah sleep before waking her up. Sarah was already partly awake, but she didn't move so she could enjoy this moment of secret closeness with her mother. Once she was fully awake, the wall went back up and her mother kept a proper distance. That's sad. Deeper effects of being emotionally shut down. Of course, emotionally immature parents were once children themselves. And as children, they may have had to shut down many of their deepest feelings in order to be acceptable to their own parents. It's likely that Ellie and Sarah's mother also grew up with parental insensitivity toward their feelings. Many emotionally immature people were over-pruned early in life, growing up within a very limited range of acceptability. Their personalities are like stunted bonsai trees, trained to grow in unnatural shapes because they had to bend to fit their families. They were unable to develop fluidly into the integrated, natural people they might have become. It may be that many emotionally immature people weren't allowed to explore and express their feelings and thoughts enough to develop a strong sense of self and mature individual identity. This made it hard for them to know themselves, limiting their ability to engage in emotional intimacy. If you don't have a basic sense of who you are as a person, you can't learn how to emotionally engage with other people at a deep level. This arrested self-development gives rise to additional, deeper personality weaknesses that are common among emotionally immature people, as outlined in this chapter. Ooh, this is heavy. I understand. This actually, I need to like star this page. My goodness. Okay. They are often inconsistent and contradictory. Instead of having a well integrated sense of who they are, emotionally immature people are more like an amalgam, yes, of various borrowed parts, many of which don't go together well, because they had to shut down important parts of themselves out of fear of their parents' reactions. Their personalities formed in isolated clumps, like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit together. This explains their inconsistent reactions, which makes them so difficult to understand. Ugh, this is so good. Because they probably weren't allowed to express and integrate their emotional experiences in childhood, these people grow up to be emotionally inconsistent adults. Their personalities are weakly structured, and they often express contradictory emotions and behaviors. They step in and out of emotional states, never noticing their inconsistency. When they become parents, these traits create emotional bafflement in their children. One woman described her mother's behavior as chaotic, flip-flopping in ways that made no sense. That was my mom. This inconsistency means that as parents, emotionally immature people may be either loving or detached, depending on their mood. Their children feel fleeting moments of connection with them, but don't know when or under what conditions their parent might be emotionally available again. This sets up what behavioral psychologists call an intermittent reward system. This is really good. Meaning that getting a reward for your effort is possible, but completely unpredictable. This creates a tenacious resolve to keep trying to get the reward, because once in a while, these efforts do pay off. This is me to a T. In this way, parental inconsistency can be the quality that binds children most closely to their parents as they keep hoping to get that infrequent and elusive positive response. Growing up with an inconsistent parent is likely to undermine a child's sense of security, keeping the child on edge. Since a parent's response provides a child's emotional compass, such children also are likely to believe that their parents' changing moods are somehow their fault. This one is called Elizabeth's Story. Elizabeth's mother was emotionally unpredictable and kept her guessing. She always felt anxious when approaching her mother. Would her mother push her away, or would she be interested and engaged? Elizabeth told me. I had to read her moods constantly. If she seemed negative, I would keep my distance, but if she was in a good mood, I could talk to her. She had the power to make me happy. I tried my best to win her approval. As a child, Elizabeth often worried that she had caused her mother's negative mood change. Feeling responsible, Elizabeth came to the conclusion, I must be flawed. Elizabeth wasn't a flawed child, but the only way she could make sense of her mother's moods was to think they resulted from something she did, or worse, something she was. They develop strong defenses that take the place of the self. Instead of learning about themselves and developing a strong, cohesive self in early childhood, emotionally immature people learn that certain feelings were bad and forbidden. They unconsciously develop defenses against experiencing many of their deeper feelings. As a result, energies that could have gone towards developing a full self were instead devoted to suppressing their natural instincts, resulting in a limited capacity for emotional intimacy. Not realizing the magnitude of their parents' developmental limitations, many children of emotionally immature people think they must be a genuine, fully developed person hiding inside the parent. Not realizing the magnitude of their parents' developmental limitations. Many children of emotionally immature people think there must be a genuine, fully developed person hiding inside that parent, a real self they could connect to if only their parent would let them. This is especially true if the parent was occasionally affectionate or attentive. As one woman told me, with my parents, I used to pick the good parts of them I liked and pretend that was the real part. That makes me so sad. This all makes me so sad. uh, I would tell myself that this good part would eventually win out, but it never did take over. I also used to pretend that the hurtful parts of them weren't real, but now I realize it's all real. Uh, I also used to pretend that the hurtful parts of them weren't real, but now I realize it's all real. When people's defenses have become an integral part of their personality, they're as real as scar tissue in the body. It may not have belonged there originally, but once formed, it's enduring. These limitations become a major part of people's personalities. Whether they can ultimately become more authentic and emotionally available depends on their ability to self-reflect. Whether they can ultimately become more authentic and emotionally available depends on their ability to self-reflect. People often wonder whether their parents can ever change. That depends on whether their parents are willing to self-reflect, which is the first step in any change. Unfortunately, if their parents aren't interested in noticing their impacts on others, they have no impetus to look at themselves. Without such self-reflection, there's no way to change. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining me. I am reading Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. It's helpful for me because I've recently gone no contact with my dad. Y'all be great, okay? Sending my love. Mwah.